Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects Podcast. I tell you what, it is cold where we are. We're coming to you from Chicago. It is day 3 of Microsoft Ignite 2024. We are not built for this kind of weather, are we, Nick?
No, Chris, I was reflecting exactly those words. We are not built for the cold. And we walked through in my mind, it was a blizzard. And to be fair, it was maybe 2 centimeters worth of snow, but the wind was blowing, it was in our faces. And those of us who come from warm climates, this is hard.
This is not great. Yeah. We don't know how to handle this stuff.
Yeah.
Snow coming down the inside of your shirt, and we don't know how to do that. But nonetheless, we're excited. We're doing some great in-person recordings. It's always great to catch up with everyone. And one of those folks that we haven't caught up with since 2018, from episode way back, episode 21. Mr. Anthony Bartolo, great to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and sorry about the weather that's out here. For us Canadians, this is a light dusting. But
a light dusting.
Yeah, this doesn't even feature on your blip of.
No, this is a city would still be running. It's been interesting though to see everybody's excitement with the snow coming down. A lot of people seeing snow for the first time, right? It's like being in Ignite for the first time. It's the same type of excitement, and it's great that there's that experience. But yes, for people from a warmer climate, and you're not prepared for this, it's hectic.
You said to me you had 16 feet. Of snow.
The most I've experienced is 16 feet of snow, which would actually block the front door of your house, and you're unable to get out. I actually had to maneuver out the kitchen window to dive into the backyard to then swim through the snow to get to the other side.
No.
Yes, to get the shovel. And then you have the joys of the snowplow, which goes through your street, and it doesn't pick up the snow. It just pushes it to the side. Yeah. So then you have now a 20-foot high compact snow and ice on your driveway, and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. It's kind of like living in a refrigerator, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, like an ice box. So.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes me think that I would want to keep a blowtorch just to make a tunnel through the snow to get back to the street.
There's a lot of people that do that. You'd be surprised. The actual other hot item is heated driveways. Oh. So they'll have the metal elements inside of their driveways. And there's a lot of IoT projects that actually adhere to that as well in terms of certain temperatures and knowing that there's that weight on the driveway that it needs to turn on to melt it.
I'm a fan, Chris. I don't know about you.
Well, how about we just stay in the warm spot, in the warmer places?
I was going to say.
So it is good to be back in Ignite. It is good to have conferences and in-person attendance and all of these cool things back. But also, the world is changing. Lots of things have changed. When we last spoke to you, Anthony, we spoke about IoT. We talked about all the cool stuff. You told us a story about, mouse traps and refrigerators and IoT stuff. Which was super interesting. And, what are we talking about today, Nick?
So today is an interesting view on Anthony, and he's kindly given us his time because Anthony reflects a trend that we have in the industry where deeply focused infrastructure folks are moving over into the dev world. And one of the things we've struggled with as infrastructure people is how do you reinvent yourself from configuring a switch, a router, an ARM template maybe, right? And having to read or find an article about how do I read this template thing, right? To all of a sudden, you're actually writing code, and it's not just VS Code. You are Visual Studio coding in .NET. How do you move from one to the other, and how do you become successful at that change? Because it's a dramatic shift, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I was always the odd duck, though, right? So dabbling in IoT back in 2018 on an infrastructure team, unheard of, right? And so it came, down to governance and geofencing and whole aspects of infrastructure side maintenance and management of IoT. But then there was also that intrigue of, well, what if I could code? What if I could develop? I have ideas. I have things that I want to do. You rely on others, but obviously their time is also precious as well. And so, just out of curiosity, you start building and coding. And I started in Python and JavaScript first, and just learning the architectural of how you put an app together, right? And that's the thing. We haven't talked since 2018, and so a lot of the change occurred during that time, just because started to investigate, started to be curious. What else is out there? What else can you do? I was very lucky too in terms of the way that technology was evolving in the adoption of people's ideas, right? So now we have the introduction of AI.
Yeah.
And the introduction of AI was so profound, it makes the generalist more professional. It makes the hobbyist into a generalist. It provides that uplift. And it allows anybody that has an idea and is passionate about about it to go out and do things and not be nervous anymore. Like, if I'm going to break VS Code, am I going to break
yeah.
Visual Studio? It's been so profound that it's having that impact that we're starting to see these crazy ideas come to fruition based on the fact that what's not been done before can be done now with AI's assistance. Now, the next question I get is, well, okay, does that mean that everybody's going to become a developer? I'd argue that exists already today, right? I was at a hackathon at UCLA in LA, and they were first-year medical students. They were not developers in any right, and they were building out on Power Platform, but they were using Copilot to assist them with the questions of what they were trying to accomplish. You look back in the day, like we'll go back to 2018, there was no such thing, right? You would go on to search engine of choice.
Yep.
Right? And you would ask it questions and it would provide you answers, and the answers were kind of in line with what you're trying to do. And it would be suggestive. It wouldn't be, this is what you need to do. And then you go to forums like Stack Overflow, and there's more answers there. But again, they're all over the place too, and it's not really in line with what you're doing. Then the introduction of AI, and it's understanding what you're trying to do, and it's looking at your logic, and it's looking at your existing code or the code that you've inherited, right? And it's teaching you about what you're writing and the code that you're doing, and you're becoming better at that. You can have it write code on your behalf. A lot of people, no, that's not what I want to do. I'm more of the kin of the using AI as my forensics tool, right? How are you growing? How are you understanding? How are you adopting? And a lot of things that I learned in 2018, I'd say the ramp up, really happened when they introduced the whole AI and ChatGPT came into play, and then Copilot came into play. That's really where I exploded in terms of, now I can do pretty much any platform. Still have to know how to code. You can't just let it do its own thing. But that, in essence, has been my evolution, which really rocketed right when the introduction of Copilot happened. And now we're into that whole, you have an idea, you can build it.
I'd like to stay on that point just for a second, because as infrastructure people, we understand that you would go to the search engine of choice,
right?
And you might know how to read some PowerShell,
right?
And I know that I have some problem that I want to solve, so I'd go find the PowerShell to solve the problem, paste it and tweak it, kind of hope that I know what I'm doing, right?
Right.
But now there's a dramatic departure to what you said, which is I built an application,
right?
Which implies that you understand how to use variables,
right?
How to create constructs, also how to write code in context of modular code, assuming you in the modular code camp. However, that being said, you know how to construct an application. That's not something that just falls out of the sky.
No, it takes a lot of time and practice and a lot of fails, right? So many times I've burned up IoT units. I've, completely crashed applications, but that's how you learn, right? It's that trial and error, and it's not an overnight process, right? We haven't talked since 2018. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of learning, a lot of going through the ropes. What really did it for me was the purpose as to why, right? At Microsoft, I took a role that was enablement of students in learning how to code. And it was really refreshing to see the new ideas that are coming into play, but then the restrictions around how students learn was really eye-opening in terms of the set curriculum that was built 5 years ago is still the same curriculum that's being taught today. Yes, there are still some, foundational that makes sense, but didn't really take advantage of what the languages that they were learning were enabling them to do.
Yeah.
Even, for my kids in high school, they're learning how to code Java, and I get why. It's your foundational, right? It's for your infrastructure. It's, you're learning how to incorporate your resources. But then we talk about Python, and then even more so talk to Rust. Professors, I don't have that curriculum on that. I can't teach that,
Yeah.
right? And so we work with a lot of them to build open source curriculum to take advantage. I know Harvard has the CS50 as an example, which their full course is in Python and Rust, open source to the world. We're starting to see more of that enablement, more of that happening. And it's those that, thought that they don't have access to that now realizing that they do, right? Something as simple as, here at Ignite, we have the workshops, the hands-on labs that are instructor-led. We're asking the question, how many people have a GitHub account, right? Sorry, how many people don't have a GitHub account? Half the room puts their hands up, and you have conversations with them later. It's like, yeah, I run a business, right? And I know that, this AI thing is a big deal, and I know the cloud is a big deal. I just want to learn how to implement that. I've never seen so many, business decision makers take such an interest, so much so that they actually want to get hands-on.
Yeah.
And the reason they do is because they want to have that dialogue with the rest of their organization. Hey, this is what I learned. This is what is exciting. Can we implement that, right? We talk about that, the conversation between the decision maker, the developer, and the IT pro. That's starting to melt. It's starting to combine. And it's, the enablement that everybody has. Like the medical students at UCLA, all coding on Power Plat. The discussion that they had, or the presentation they had at GitHub Universe with GitHub Spark, GitHub Spark, which is natural language coding. This is what I want to build. Scott Hanselman here at Ignite, his team showed a demo of, here's my Visual Studio implementation. This is the website I have that does transactionals for outdoor equipment. And this is what the website looks like now. Here's the picture. Here's what I want the website to look like. Here's the second picture. Tell me the code I need to update the website to look like the second picture.
Wow.
Right? So and people, oh no, that's going to take my job away. No. It makes it easier for you to do that conversion so that you can do more unique, more AI adoption. Like, hey, if you picked up this sweater or you picked up these boots, you may like this jacket, you may like this, suggestions, right? Or patterns in terms of the way that people purchase. There's a lot of data that's not even being utilized right now that we as, solution engineers can go out and say, okay, we have this data. What else can we bring out of this that meets the organization's needs? Right? I think that for me has been the driver more so than just learning how to code. It's that I have an idea or there's a problem that needs to be addressed. As an IT pro, you do this. As a developer, you do that.
Yes.
But now you're seeing that, like you said, that evolution because the IT pro experience gives me how do I incorporate resources? How do I invoke architecture? How do I, bring others on board in terms of that security policy and build the application? And still can't do it by yourself. There's, you still have to partner with a lot of people when you're building out the more robust modular solutions, as you mentioned. But the blended conversation becomes more accepting. It's not us versus them. It's
True.
we.
It's true.
It definitely occurs to me as well, though, that the difference here, or one of the big differences in learning it, going through this process, is that in the past, and I think you described this too, you'd go to Stack Overflow, you'd find something that kind of resembles what you want to do, you're changing a variable, you're slapping it in, you run that thing and it works and you go, okay, cool, I'm done, and you move on, right? Whereas now, you're almost forced to understand what it is you're doing. So, I feel like in the long term, what that's going to do for us is it's going to turn people into efficient developers that are actually building code that might actually be a little bit more secure, right? Instead of just slapping stuff together, it runs, why do we care? We're actually now, you're being forced to understand.
I'd like to argue an extreme point on that, and that's because I'm seeing it with my kids who are coding, and they have Python in high school, and they get given a research project, and they would go to ChatGPT and say, write this thing for me. And I need a module for this, I need a module for that, and they shove everything together, and it kind of works. But if anything breaks, they have no idea how it works because there's no empirical understanding of the concepts. And we are sadly in a position where we can very quickly ask an AI something to write something for us and then have absolutely no mastery of the game. Because something that I've always known from you, Anthony, is that you wouldn't do something unless you understand it completely and empirically. And so for you to move from an infrastructure-focused engineering kind of thinking to this is my .NET class, and this is what I need, and these are my dependencies, is still that empirical thinking. So having a medium that auto-generates code for you, which you don't understand what it does, which is very much the same as when we have college kids create a CV for the first time. It spits something out. They don't understand, well, what does this document actually mean and what goes where, and over-dramatizing. However, the point is that even for you, Chris, the thread that you pulled on was first repository based, right? So you started working with GitHub, you understood versioning, and then from that point on, there was an empirical concept that you could build on to when then you used those concepts to build our website as an example. And so now, and I've been watching you over the last couple of days building things and understanding what you're doing, but also refusing to move on until you have that understanding. And
Right.
my concern that we have at the moment is that the friction is so low to generate code, especially if we take someone who generates something in no code, low code, it works until such time as I need to make a change.
Right.
And then I don't have the ownership of what it is to make a change. Then I'm going to throw the code at an AI something. It doesn't have the context.
Right.
And it'll spit out something when eventually we have a code base that is unmaintainable because there's no empirical logic. And so I'm stretching this point. However, my question in this to you is, how do we still create the understanding in folks to build clean code based on understanding when the friction is low not to?
Still goes back to no one can do this alone, right? This is a partnership. It still has to be, team play. Yes, there are organizations where it's small shops of 1 to 3, right? But even at the 1 to 3, there's still a network or community that they can reach out to. AI is part of that now in terms of the conversation. Yes, it can generate the code for you, right? But you do still have to have the background of understanding, well, just generate this code. What does the code do for me, right? What's also beneficial is the tools are not just about code generation. It's also about forensics, and it's also about security. So if you have DevOps best practices amidst your organization, right, you're still going to push your code, right, for review, right? So it's not just a blind, and we are seeing this. We're seeing junior developers using AI to generate code, pushing it for review, and it being denied by the senior developers because it doesn't meet the regulations or requirements for that organization, right? So they're told, hey, go back. These are the parameters that you have to do this in. They go back. They have to do the research. They usually do the research inside of AI. So on Visual Studio, they're doing a conversation. We call it rubber ducking. Explain to me what this code is doing. You're talking to a rubber duck, and you're explaining what the code is doing to the rubber duck, right? In this essence, you're doing this with AI. You're explaining to AI, well, you've generated this code for me, but this is the parameters and this is what I needed to do. And you're having that conversational, and that's where the learning happens for those junior devs that have the specific assignment to grow upon, right? That's been the major difference, because before it's been, okay, so I'm going to go on Stack Overflow, I'm going to find this answer, and then I'm going to ask of it, okay, well, that's cool, but it's not really what I need. Can somebody help me modify this? And they do. Now, are you allowed to use that code? Is there bits amidst that code that are security risks? Like, I've seen AI generate code where it hard codes a password.
Yeah.
Right? So what's exciting is that, not just AI for the coding aspects of being involved, also for the security. So now tools like GitHub Advanced Security, where, hey, I've created a PR, I'm going to push my code, it needs to get approval first. The GitHub Advanced Security has the Dependabot capability, which scans your code to make sure there's no malicious intent. And then there's secret scanning to make sure that there's no passwords or certificates or API strings that are being made visibly available in midst of your code. These tools in play also help to ensure that by mistake, I put in this passcode, shouldn't have, it's hard coded. Now the world has it, right? We don't have those issues. But there's also governance in terms of, okay, so I'm doing this in a test environment. And then IT is notified. Again, here's the whole connection again.
Mhm.
And, oh, yeah, we'll let it go through because it's a dev environment, but we'll mark it as risk so that, before they try to push it to production, they can't because it's marked,
Mhm.
right? Again, this means that the IT pro also has to understand what's happening. Why is code being developed this way?
Yeah.
If you go to a university today and you ask somebody if you're a developer or an IT pro, they would say neither,
Yeah.
right?
And they wouldn't necessarily understand why there is a distinction.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
It's one and the same, right? And that's the thing. Traveling around the world, when I hear when they say the term IT, I've heard IT mean just technical, all
Yes.
technical,
Yes.
right? That delineation doesn't exist. It's a pre-notion that we've come up with to say that there's a division, right? So I'm happy that that's slowly going away. And even with the modern infrastructure team that we have here under developer relations, and remember, it's the modern infrastructure under the developer relations umbrella, right? And the cloud native teams, they're more and more going into the practices of understanding what the code does as well, so they can align the appropriate templates to deploy, or they can align the appropriate resources to deploy, but they can't do that unless they know the parameters of what the code is doing. So Copilot helps them to understand functionality of what you're seeing, what it can accomplish, educates them. Oh, then these are the resources that we need. And then 2 weeks ago at GitHub Universe, and then more updates were announced here at Ignite, GitHub Copilot for Azure. Now you're really bridging operations and developers because, hey, now I have this code and I need to deploy to my subscription. And it will tell you, this is the subscription that you have. This code that will go in here, no issue. Here's the suggested AZD template that you would want to use to deploy your application so that you can deploy on top of that. Here are the security parameters you should take into consideration. Here are the costs that you can incur in utilization for CPU and what have you. This is arming the organization as a whole in terms of the functionality and the requirements for your deployment. Unheard of before, right? Before it was the developer would have to provide documentation. The documentation would have to be read by IT Pro. There would be a discussion between the two. Now it's just flow. It's literally just flow. And then the cloud is utilized, and now we're seeing templates that incorporate AI for RAG search, for semantic search, for chatbots, you name it, right? And again, parameters set by the developer. The instructions and everything can be learned by the operations through the use of AI. There's no more, well, where's your documentation? That's all gone, right? And what cuts out is, well, then you don't need to go to the search engine anymore. You don't need to go to the Stack Overflow anymore. You don't have to have all these meetings anymore because it's all there for you and it's all in your fingertips. The biggest change then that has to happen is what's happening in universities today. There is no developer. There is no IT pro. There's just, how are we enabling the organization moving forward, right? I have a lot of parents come to me and say, hey, I know you're in computer science and I know you work at Microsoft. Which programs should I get my child into? It's like, whatever they're passionate about.
Yes.
Finance, medical, you name it, because technology is in all of it now, right? And so to your point, Power Platform, right? Go out there, you're using Power Plat to build applications. And yes, it's hard to make changes to the platform once it's been established. But even that, the fact that they've architected this idea to translate that from Power Plat to the next step in terms of we're going to use Python or we're going to use .NET, C#, right? It's not that big of a jump. And it's either, that individual that created on Power Plat wants to learn more and is, oh, this is cool, wants to take the next step. Or now I'm going to partner with my org. I have this architectural solution. We just need to convert it to another language, right? And take it to that next step too.
What do you make of that, Chris?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely that convergence going on, right? I've been saying for years now that IT pros are writing more code than ever before, right? And it doesn't matter. It may not necessarily be application code that has to be compiled into some sort of application, but we're working in PowerShell, we're working in Python, we're working in ARM templates and infrastructure as code projects and stuff, right? Yeah, exactly. So I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think if you take that step back again, where you say, well, we really don't want to make a distinction between folks that work in our dev team versus folks that work in our infra team, right?
Yeah.
And we're building policy and governance around what we do with code as an organization. That just makes a whole lot of sense to me, because now it doesn't matter where you sit on which side of the fence, or if there's even a fence anymore.
Yes.
We can still keep all of that stuff, all of that IP safe. We can make sure all of that stuff is being well managed, well maintained, and you don't end up in a situation where the person who wrote the one particular script leaves the org, and now you don't know where the source files are, right?
My concern there, Chris, is, and while I acknowledge your point, where do we start with, again, that empirical understanding of a wider ecosystem, that you've got an IT pro who can learn how to code, or you've got the I want to say the mislabeled view of developers who, I know how to code, but anything that runs outside of my machine is just a mystery, right? So infrastructure is a complete mystery. And if we look at how do we upskill folks in a meaningful manner, so developers towards infrastructure, infrastructure towards developers, and then people getting into the industry, because we need fresh brains, right? We are not going to have an industry if we don't have a continual influx of people who want to do great things within the industry. And looking around us, Chris, we can see that there's people our age, right? So look at Anthony, look at you, look at me, and we would be able to potentially move from one knowledge domain to another knowledge domain because we've gained that understanding of how to learn. Now, my concern is if you take a medical person and teach them how to code, how does that scale? So there's an enablement and a literacy, which are completely acknowledged.
Right.
However, how do we sustain, or even how do we innovate within this industry when we have blurry lines and we don't have, again, that wider context? Because the friction is low to generate code, and because we are also in an era of, we've got cloud services, there's tick boxes who switch stuff on. We used to build things in data centers, and we used to have to understand how the stuff works. Now, do we have several levels of understanding in the folks that we're building, which is, I can code and it does stuff, and then who are the people who build the constructs and the mechanisms to do the hard lifting to make other things easier? So how do we still retain that as an industry and not just lower the friction so that we've got people who can exist at what we call a level 150, a level 200?
Right.
Right? But then how do we still do the hard things, and how do we train and build those people who don't necessarily have a reason to embrace doing a hard thing?
Specialists are still going to be needed, right? You're still going to have people that are going to have depth. The one main example I can provide is security, right? From a security perspective, especially if you have an ISO that you have to follow, you have to be certified. There's a reason why you're a security specialist. But the challenge is, for every one security specialist, there's 200 people that they have to support, right? So there's that scale mechanism. In terms of the barriers being removed, it makes it easier to have that dialogue and conversation. It makes it easier to automate a lot of the addressing of the security issues, still with notification, right? So that whole enablement occurs. The blurred lines hopefully means that we're fixing our sights on the opportunity or problem that we need to address, right? Very simple example that we're doing in the apps experts area here at Ignite. Burke and Bridget were showcasing on intelligent apps, building of a game, right? And they built it in Python. It's the New York Times word association game, right? And the premise was, this is the rule set that we have to build towards. It's not do I use JavaScript, do I use Python? It's, this is the rule set that I have to adhere to. This is how the game is played, right? These are the parameters for that game. And then dissecting that in terms of, well, modularly, what takes care of the intelligence to understand that the correlation of the words mean this and what they mean. It's not about, hey, these are variables I have to assign and this is the architecture of the code. It's literally, what am I trying to build? What is my desired outcome? And what are the parameters behind that to achieve that outcome? That shift means that it's not just a developer or IT pro that's thinking that way.
Yeah.
It's the medical student, it's the salespeople, it's
Yeah.
the mechanics, right? Like the whole gamut really blows the doors open. The language becomes secondary, still important, right?
But secondary.
But secondary.
Yeah.
You're doing computer science, you're going to do it in Python because it's better for that focus, right? If you're building a game, it could be JavaScript, right? It could be Rust and Python, but you may not need that functionality, and then the overhead is too high, right? The inclusion of AI takes it that step further because it can provide those recommendations. Oh, so you're building this. Okay. Do you know what language you want to build it in? No? Okay. Tell me a little bit more about this game. Is it going to have high graphical capabilities? Is there going to be a lot of animation? Like really getting into, and prior to, you would research. I want to build this type of game. And then spits out the code for you. Now you'll understand why you're doing what you're doing to build it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other thing that's important to probably understand here as well is we're removing the barriers to entry, right? So those barriers are being broken down by AI and all of this stuff.
Right.
So anyone now has the opportunity to do these great things, but responsibility isn't being removed, right? There's still a responsibility when with all of this knowledge and all of this stuff that you can now do to be able to make sure that you're making decisions that are not bad for your organization or bad for whatever, right? Bad for the community in some way. So I think there's still, and I think it's important that, now when we look at university curriculums and high school curriculums and whatnot, as they're teaching folks how to use these tools to go off and, make the impossible possible, I think it's important that sort of ethics and responsibility foundation continues to and does get sort of brought in at that level, so that folks understand it's like, hey, I'm being given a really big tool here, but I need to use this tool responsibly because of this and this reason. And that's not a thing we can necessarily fix with technology, right?
True.
We can monitor and alert, but we can't condition folks to doing the right thing or the wrong thing or what have you.
Yeah. With the benefit of the hindsight that you have, Anthony, I want to ask you a hard question.
Yeah.
If you had to cast yourself forward 3 to 5 years.
In the future, okay.
Yeah. What are we looking like?
Three to 5 years is a tricky one because it's moving so rapidly.
Yes.
I don't even think that, because you hear that question a lot. What do you see in 3 to 5 years? I say within a year to 2 years.
Because to be fair, parents are going to be asking you, so my child is going to invest in a 3 or 5 year degree.
Right.
Because we think there's an outcome that we want to work towards in 5 years' time. So we have a rate of change and adoption with AI where AI is moving from version to version, and the depth is increasing and the true usefulness of AI is increasing.
Yes.
And that's because there's better grounding, better context. Now, if you had to throw a bit of AI flavor into the pot, let's just start a year out from now and try to extrapolate. What is a year from now going to look like?
I think a year from now looks like more and more people being involved in creating solutions. I see a lot of innovation on the show floor here, right? In terms of not just adoption of AI, just how to make things easier, right? How to deploy technology. And it's interesting that we have a lot of decision makers that are on the floor asking the questions of these innovative solutions, but not from a perspective of technology, but a perspective of what it needs to address, right? That mindset, I think, is the biggest thing that's changing, because it's not I'm running towards something. It's I'm incorporating all the things to address, right? And it's not I'm just, at the whole first premise of AI is I'm going to rub a little AI on this and I'm either going to make money or save money.
Yes.
That quickly dissipated.
Yes.
Right? Now it's, wow, so this solution does this and this solution does this, but I'm trying to achieve this.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of people just having open dialogue about that. And then they're talking to AI about that too, right? In terms of its opinion. And they're coming back to conversations with us with questions that, wow, where did this question come from? This is really intriguing. It's piquing a lot of interest. What's crazy too is that it also influences us in terms of the path that we go for the next iteration of services and developer tools and you name it, right? That we may not even thought of just based on the feedback that we're getting based on the questions that are being asked, right? You're going to see like the whole thing evolve to that medical student that has that idea and creates that chatbot and gets excited. Now that I've created that chatbot, I want to do this next thing that does the deduction of a specific ailment and does, becomes that notable information that, doesn't cure you, but it's all the information that you need for that.
Yep.
And then it found this nuance that that we couldn't correlate because we can't see all the data in that instance. And now there's a vaccine that's being produced and tested. Like we're going to see that quick evolution, and that's why it's like the 3 to 5 years is flying cars and the whole
and that's
right?
the thing, right? As these use cases now start, because I think we went through this ramp up phase with AI where the technology was there, but not everyone had a use case for it yet, or a thing that they wanted to solve. But I think as folks are starting to now be conditioned to thinking and having this tool available to them, the use cases are becoming more and more available, or at least being identified. So we're seeing that happen. And I think that's where the magic is going to start happening.
I was at a dinner 2 nights ago, and I was talking to a salesperson, and she was actually rather enthusiastic about the fact that there was an AI assistant that was calling out sales signals in conversations that she wasn't aware of. And my question to her, because ultimately we need a measurable. This AI tool, since the adoption, have you made more money? Have you closed more sales? Does it translate into order numbers? And the answer was definitively yes. And that's not a general chat GPT thing.
Yeah,
that's
a very
specialized
specific solution.
Right.
Yeah. And so I applaud the specificity of AI, and that we want to have things that do particular things. I have an unfair question for both of you. And this week,
never ask unfair questions.
This week in the news, we've had some interesting news where the world is kind of tottering at current encryption schemes being broken, right? So a little bit in nation-state territory, but still the principle remains. We have some interesting announcements about quantum on stage. Satya was sharing, and Microsoft has seemingly currently got the high ground in quantum for now. And this also takes us again down the road of uncertainty of what does the world look like when the traditional mechanisms that we've depended on from a safety point of view has been kind of the lead pipe of encryption, decryption, kind of certificate-based stuff, right? So we go from TLS 1.1 to TLS 1.4, and now we are secure again. But in a world where TLS might become as meaningless as tissue paper, it becomes harder to forecast. Let me start with you, Chris, from an infrastructure point of view, leaning very much into the developer world, and then to follow up with you, Anthony, from a developer world looking back into infrastructure. What are those implications for you?
Look, it's easy to get carried away with sort of and to buy into the fear mongering as well, right? Because let's be real, a lot of the stuff that you see in the media or on the news, it's half a snippet of a story or truth, and it gets the tech press take it and they turn it into something that isn't always accurate, factual, or true, right? So I think, look, are we in a place where technology is evolving so quickly that stuff that we deem to be secure today will not be secure tomorrow? Absolutely, I think we are.
Agreed.
But I think that the same opportunity that exists for breaking code and breaking encryption and quantum this and all of that, that same opportunity exists on the other side of the fence as well, right? Where that the same, folks who are thinking about it in the one way can think about it in the other way as well. So I'm not super concerned personally, because I think there's obviously some truths to some stuff, but there really isn't. There was a fantastic headline the other day about, and I'm trying to remember what it was, and someone had said that they'd broken the RSA or something weird like that. And when you actually read the article, the headline and the article itself don't even line up,
That's
because
right.
that's not at all what happened, right? And a lot of that stuff is that.
That doesn't mean that time is not coming, Chris.
Oh, 100%, I agree. But I also feel like when the time comes, right, and when we look at what is, in terms of cryptography, quantum computing at the moment is still only being able to factor like very small numbers, right?
Yeah.
We're not even at a place where this should be a concern yet.
Yeah.
It will come. Will it come in our lifetime? I don't know. But I also feel like when the time comes, I do believe that there will be solutions there for us. There will be things to be ready. We know that there are, quantum safe, crypto and quantum safe ciphers available, or at least being tested and piloted and
In
stuff.
theory.
In theory, right. All of the stuff is theoretical
Yeah.
until it's proven otherwise, right?
That's right.
So no, not concerned at all. I think that there's always going to be that sort of very, very quick adoption of certain things. The rest of the world takes a little bit of time to kind of speed up.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's a very big wake-up call for everyone, to say you cannot rest on your security posture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't configure something today and walk away from it for 6 months and expect it's still going to be secure in 6 months. Doesn't
fair.
matter what it is, right?
Yeah.
So as we need to get into this evolution where we're constantly evaluating what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if we're doing it the right way.
Yeah. So asking you the same question, Anthony, but obviously you have the benefit of a dual lens of having made a progression from the infrastructure world into the developer world with a deep understanding of the things we used to take for granted, as well as working for both one of the largest security vendors in the world who's deeply invested in research, as well as a vendor that actually creates a lot of these technologies that make other technologies possible, like VS Code and Visual Studio, and even Visual Studio, the Quantum Edition, right? So, what do you make of that?
I've always said that your information is always somebody else's currency,
Yeah.
right? Everybody wants access to your information because they want to sell it to the highest bidder.
Mhm.
Security isn't a destination anymore. It's a purpose, and it's everybody's purpose now.
I love
Right.
that.
It's not, a security specialist or an IT pro has to take care of security. Everybody's responsible for security. Is it top of mind for everybody? No.
Yeah.
Right. Developers have tasks, and there's so much time that they have to do these tasks, and it's hard. It's not easy, right? To what Chris said earlier, for what's available out there for those that are doing the attacks is also for those that are protecting. What I'm very appreciative of is the mindset that if we're focusing on the solution and we're not chasing after what's to come, the whole introduction of AI from Sentinel perspective and from Security Copilot perspective, and from GitHub Advanced Security Solutions, it makes these tools easier for others to adopt. If we are accepting of others to build code through PowerPlat, through VS Code in combination with Copilot, and same with Visual Studio, we should also expect that we are also protecting them by offering the tools that make it easier for them to adopt a security posture and have the ability to be taught how to remediate. Because the expectation of them immediately implementing security policies shouldn't be there because they're not a specialist.
Right.
But if we have the tools that are available to say, oh, nope, you should consider this differently because there's a security a possible loophole or an issue that could occur from what this is, we can't expect them to know that. The technology is there to arm them with that and make them apply the remediation so that they learn the next time, don't do it this way.
Yeah.
Right? It's not enough for it to just self-heal, which is available as well, but it's also empowering to have that understanding, like when you're building the code, understand what security posture is as a purpose, as opposed to a destination.
I love that. And again, we're back down to empirical understanding of a concept that we want to build on. I'm aware that we are heading towards the top of the hour and that we haven't asked you, what is it that you would like to plug?
To plug? So much.
The list can be as long as you like. We have show notes. We have QR codes. This could be a 15-minute plug if you like.
No. Okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest. Everybody that's out there that's interested in learning to code, getting started to code, we have a great open source repo that's called Mastering GitHub Copilot. And what I love about this repo, it doesn't touch on the DevOps aspect. It touches on the coding aspect and the tools that are available to you. It even goes down to the fact that you don't even need to load an IDE on your machine, right? You use a technology called code spaces, which is VM-like, but a lot more lightweight. And it allows you to have that Copilot experience inside of this lightweight VM to start working on code and understanding how to harness AI in a forensic sense to help you build forward and your ideas and make them come to fruition. What I love about it is it's community driven. So we initialized it, we created the foundation for it, and now the community has jumped in and added more functionality to it. If you're looking to get started on coding and you want to have AI help you learn, this is the best way to learn about how to utilize the tool. And by the way, this works for both VS Code and Visual Studio, right? So the practices work in both. Start there. And the beauty of it, because it's open source, community driven, always growing, functionality always being added, always being kept up to date. I think that for me would be the best place to start in terms of where you're going to go with your coding learning journey to address the ideas and opportunities that you have.
Okay. I love that. How can folks find you either on X, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn? What is your preferred?
Is MySpace still open? Is it?
Get off my lawn, kids.
My parents are on Facebook. No. So I would say LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn for me has been a great place to have conversations. What I love about LinkedIn is the community capabilities too now, and you can involve yourselves in conversations into community. I would say LinkedIn would probably be your best bet.
That's fantastic. And both from Chris and I, we just want to extend our gratitude to eNow, who were kind enough to make the space that we are literally sitting in and recording possible as we roamed the halls of Microsoft Ignite, trying to find a safe space, not from an emotional point of view, but from a recording point of view, to record it, because it was hard, y'all.
Yes, no, definitely. So very grateful for those folks for helping us out, finding us a spot here. So very good.
And so out of courtesy, we are going to link to them in the show notes as well as on YouTube, so that you could please go visit them and show your gratitude for literally making this episode possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Chris, wrapping up this episode from Ignite, it's been very different, and snow's outside. We've had a fantastic guest with Anthony. What's next for us?
Well, we won't be going outside for at least a little while, because
that's right.
It looks pretty cold out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, we'll be having some more episodes today. Hopefully, getting some more episodes recorded. That'll be fun. And hey, it's Ignite. Who knows what's going to happen next?
That's right. Yeah. It's our second last day at Ignite, and what's wonderful for us is the energy and the actual ability to see folks face to face. And this is something that we've lost with the COVID years and working hybrid. And so from our perspective, it's truly wonderful to have these experiences again. And we are in a place where conferences are changing. They're coming back in different ways. And largely, it's also a place of acceptance of it is what it is in terms of conferences are what they are at the moment. So we look forward to doing a repeat of this episode potentially next year.
Hopefully it's not another 5 years. Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually longer.
Yeah. And seeing what's changed.
Yes.
Hey, you're on the road a lot. Maybe we'll catch you in one of the cities you
That's
visit.
right.
Possibly in Joburg, yeah.
Yeah. Before we go, do you want to just call out the AI tour that you're part of?
So we are doing an AI tour across a lot of countries in the world. I think there's 60 stops. Not all of them I'll be able to visit, unfortunately. It's a lot.
Fortunately.
Fortunately. I do have a team that we will see out there. Check it out, because not only are there breakouts, there's also hands-on labs. And for those that are tactile, they need to learn by doing. It's a really great opportunity to be in the room with advocates that can help you along your learning journey. So definitely, if it does come in your area, definitely check it out. I think the website is aitour.microsoft.com.
We'll link that in the show notes as well.
Yep, for sure.
Anthony, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you again.
Thank you for having me.
Great catching up.
Definitely. Thank you.